language architecture. Language architecture is very big into helping create and foster a relationship that's productive and professional between a trainer and a client. And what I mean by that, where I came up with this, I was babysitting my niece and nephew, who are very fussy eaters, right? And my sister had been trying to get them to eat some vegetables. No, we're not going to eat the vegetables, da 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 da. So when I had them, I said, you can either have 2 bites of peas or 2 bites of carrots. Which of those is the least offensive to you? Well, suddenly he's going, oh my gosh, this is overwhelming for me. There's too many people here. I need to be on edge. I'm stressed. My mom can't keep me safe, whatever, right? And so rather than moving us towards, hey, this is comfortable and I can cope in this situation, you're actually moving us farther away and potentially putting yourself, the public at risk, whatever. So instead, what I want to do is take a break from that space so that he can just relax. And we are going to work our way towards that space by going to a quiet kind of coffee shop space first and practicing there and strategize to get back to the busy coffee shop.
Everything looks good on my end. Okay. So welcome everybody. I'm Lianne Shinton from Automation Dogs, a software CRM for dog trainers. I'm also a dog trainer myself. And I was chatting with somebody you're going to meet in a minute here. And we were talking about how important client communication and helping your clients learn, how important that is and how much it kind of gets missed by us dog trainers. We always love to learn about the dogs and dog behavior. But today we are going to take a deep dive with Erin Kramer. Welcome, Erin.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I love talking about client coaching and client communication.
And it's so needed, so needed. So I hope this will help our dog trainers out there because we talk a lot about running your business and learning about SEO and running your business and working your leads and all of that. And then we talk about working dogs and dog behavior, but this is something that is often missed. So just to kind of introduce you, Erin is from Tug Dogs, and I love that name. And before we dive into coaching clients, I would love to hear about your journey, how you got into dog training and where you are now with your amazing business that it sounds like you've sold a portion of it, which is so inspiring.
I did. Yeah, thank you. So I've been training dogs for 18 years now, so it's been a minute. When I was in college, I was eager to adopt my first dog, and like many of our clients, I did no research. I was just, yay, my first dog. And the dog that I ended up adopting was a Chow Chow. And so, us trainers, right, we immediately know, oh, that's going to be a project, right? And indeed, he was a project, and I loved him dearly, and he was a wonderful dog, but he had some significantly challenging behaviors, including aggression. And that led me on a path to becoming a dog trainer. And I always loved animals, so it was a good fit. And also, I was in school studying literature, especially modern Russian literature. And what does one do with a degree in that, right? There was not a clear path forward. So once I got hooked into the dog world, that really was a path that I wanted to move forward with. So I actually moved to Western Canada and attended a school up there to get certified as a dog trainer. I came back. I worked managing a kennel and a large-scale all-day play type of dog boarding and daycare facility. And then I set off starting my own business, and I just kind of took it from there, figuring out what my niche would be, who I wanted to be as a trainer, and collecting a lot more skills over the last 18 years. And at this point, I'm really focused on behavior modification, especially for significant problem behaviors like fear, aggression, anxiety. I've done obedience, I've done dog sport, service, therapy dogs, all that kind of stuff, but behavior modification is where I started with my Chow Chow, and it kind of always draws me back in. So that's my focus. I am based in Sacramento, California. I am very fortunate to have a team of good trainers that I get to work with and help mentor them, as well as get, more education from them too. So that's been really fun. And then I've also done just a little bit on the side of teaching people to become dog trainers. I'm affiliated with a couple different trainer schools in that way. And I have also done that myself, just offering some coursework here. And that's really helped me kind of develop more into this topic that we're talking about today of client coaching, how important that is, because I was watching newer trainers. I was working with my staff of like, hey, why are you in this challenging situation that I don't find myself in, or, whatever, navigating those experiences and really coming to an understanding of, gosh, all of us trainers have this problem of like client follow through and the inability to get clients to do their part while they're simultaneously trying to hold us accountable for the results. It's a tricky situation to be in. So I do think that it's really important that trainers are aware of this issue and have some tools to be able to navigate it.
So chow chows, huh?
Yeah. That's a lot of dog for your first dog at 18 years old, but he taught me a lot.
Yeah, I grew up with chow chows. Part of my family, I've experienced life with 3 different chow chows.
Wow.
One who was very dangerous and human aggressive, and I just thought it was super cool because I was in his like life and he accepted me as a child. And I didn't die.
Yeah, right.
So that was very impactful. As you were saying that, I'm like, oh my gosh, that big old chow chow.
Totally.
The other ones were pretty fearful and just
Those dogs, I call them deep end dogs. They teach you how to respect a dog, right? It's not a lab, it's not a golden, right? There's a different level of communication and cooperation that has to be found. That's very much a two-way street with those kind of dogs.
Yes, they do teach us a lot. And it's a privilege to be accepted in their world.
Yeah, and it's something that you earn with those dogs, absolutely. And that's very much how my Rocky was. I mean, he loved people in the circle of trust, and he was mostly indifferent to people who are not in the circle of trust. But if you wanted to force him to do something, like a vet who tried to just flip him over, it's not going to go over well.
Yeah. And Russia. So have you been to Russia?
I haven't. It was just a concentration I picked because I was like deep reading Tolstoy and Dostoevsky at the time. And I was like, hey, here's a major where like I don't have to take a bunch of math classes. Perfect. Sign me up.
So can you share some Russian words for us?
I actually don't know any Russian words. We studied Russian authors. So we studied a lot of the themes in like the 19th century Russian literature, themes around the Russian Revolution, themes around psychology and politics. It's a really fascinating culture, and that's a really interesting time. So you have books like War and Peace and Crime and Punishment and like some of the big heavy hitters. So it is really interesting that I took a skill from that world and applied it to dog training and client coaching, which is actually going to be something that I'll mention, which is like creating outlines, right? In my college career, I did a lot of writing, obviously being a literature major, and I even worked at the writing center helping students on campus. And the first step for me was always creating an outline. An outline helped me draw all the information in that as I'm brainstorming and thinking about what is it that I want to say. The outline was a really key component for me to be able to brainstorm that, to organize it in a way that made sense so that I could present it appropriately. And I utilized that skill, and I encourage students and even my staff to utilize that skill of having an outline for a variety of reasons. I think there's a lot of benefits to it. One is that it's really easy to get pulled off course by a client, right? There is like a syndrome where a client's like, okay, I paid for an hour with this person. Let me try and get as much information as I can out of this person. So I'm going to start listing off every question that I have. And the reality is, often what I say to clients is like, it's not a one sentence answer, right? It's not like I just need to give you this one sentence and then you're going to be able to go utilize that. That's like, real quick, how do you do algebra? It's not that simple, right? I'll give you a concrete example. A client was like, how did you get your dog to stay even with all these distractions around? I can give a one sentence response, right? But we all know that a client is going to need much more than that in order to get their dog to do that. There's a lot of steps. There's things that they need to understand, right? So part of what an outline does is it allows me as a trainer in the moment to not get sidetracked. Now, in that moment, when a client brings something up, I can't just dismiss it. It's very important that I validate that is important to you, right? As a client, I understand that you want to work on stay, and I'm going to put that in my notes. But today we have some things that come before that, like your dog is nervous or your dog doesn't have basic engagement skills that would lead us to the stay or whatever. So that way, especially when I'm working with newer students or newer trainers, they're not getting sucked into these other categories of training or answering questions that are not really going to get the client where they need to go, both because there's not the allotted time to do that, and also because the client doesn't know that there may be steps before, we tackle whatever it is that they want to tackle, that we need a dog that will pay attention to them or isn't, having crippling anxiety or whatever the case may be. I'm a big proponent.
Excellent information. So let's dive in. Share with us what you think can help our dog trainer listeners.
Absolutely.
Because that's the most common folk that listen to my podcast. And
love it.
Yeah. What info do you have for us?
I have so much info, you guys. Okay. So I think we've all had this experience, and I noticed it even early on as a trainer. And, I like to joke with people that if you get a group of dog trainers together and you ask us, what are some of our biggest challenges? Usually right up there at the top of the list is lack of client follow through or the difficulty of working with our human clients, right? That's really at the top of the list. And I had that same experience. Colleagues, friends, trainers that work with me, we all had that same experience. And finally, one day, light bulb, I was like, wait a second. We all have this experience, but none of us have done anything about it, right? None of us, we spent all this time learning about how to clearly communicate with dogs and read dogs and motivate dogs, and then nothing on the human part. And so we're all getting frustrated, burnt out, overwhelmed, not achieving the results that we want, even though we have the information on how to get there, because there's this gap in how to reach our clients. And so once I had that kind of light bulb moment, that pushed me into learning a lot more about how to work with people. And what I did was I networked with a lot of people who are in that industry, life coaches and psychologists and teachers and all those kinds of things, to start to pick their brains and actually go into the spaces, like groups that they were in, and just hear how they handle these same kinds of issues. And I read a whole bunch about the psychology of habit change and communication and all of those fun things. And I kind of pooled that information and started applying it in ways that would make sense as a dog trainer, and kind of putting these things into practical steps and testing them, right? Actively testing them with clients and kind of refining them or kicking out the ones that didn't work or too much effort or those kinds of things. And I actually created a pretty valuable system from my point of view of how we navigate these experiences where we have to coach clients. Because in the end, me knowing how to do it, you knowing how to do it as a dog trainer is completely irrelevant. You could be the best dog trainer on the planet, but if you can't get a client to do it, you won't be successful, right? And so what I teach my students now, kind of one of the first lectures when I'm working with people who want to become dog trainers, is that in reality, dog training has 3 different hats that you have to wear. And those hats deserve equal attention and energy. We all come in passionate about the dog part and focused on the dog part. And I know that the trainer school that I went to and mentorship that I went to, 100% focused on dog. And so it took me time to catch up and realize there were these other 2 hats that I needed to focus on if I wanted to be successful. The second hat that I'm talking about is what we're talking about today, client coaching. You have to know how to communicate with people. And that third hat is your specialty, which is the business of dog training. Most dog trainers, if you want to run your own business, you better be paying attention, right, to how to run a business. You have to get clients. You have to make sales. You have to not drive yourself crazy with administrative tasks and keeping organized with your communication. And that is not where I shine, but it is magical that there are people like you that are available to do that, because it is equally important. If you don't have that, you're missing all of the foundation to be able to do what you want to do and affect change for people and dogs. So those 3 hats, to me, are the most important categories, and each one deserves careful consideration, practice, thought, energy, all of those kinds of things. So knowing that and kind of creating this system, then I started applying it with the trainers that work for me, right? So I developed specific strategies. I'm going to go through a few of those as we continue on through the podcast so that some of the trainers watching this could actually go apply them and use them. And then I did something that's very unpopular in one way, but also very valued in another. I do role play with my staff and some of my students. Yes, it's awkward. However, I think my team will tell you, and in fact, they have told me that they walk into every session with the client prepared to handle all of the weird and wild stuff that can come up. And listen, when you've been doing this for 18 years, I'm sure you can get some really weird stuff. Clients who have mental illness, clients who won't stop crying, clients who are trauma dumping, clients who are combative, clients who want to talk over you, clients who said, I already tried that and it didn't work, but they didn't do it the way that you would do it. All of the stuff that can come up, my trainers come in prepared to handle that because of that weird, awkward role play that we do. And I'll even let them do reverse role play where they can try and put me on the spot and act like a crazy client, right? Or a difficult client, I should say. And we practice those things together. And I can see the impact of that when I work with a couple of the other trainer schools as mentors, and their students come in and they have great fundamental knowledge about the dog training. But then I ask them, well, what do you do if an older lady comes in who is maybe elderly, right, and weak and has a 120-pound aggressive mastiff that's eyeing other dogs in your group class? How do you handle that? I don't know, right? What do you do if you have someone that's talking over you and saying, I want to train this way and it's not the way that you train? How do you handle that? They don't know, right? And so to be able to navigate those kinds of situations professionally, and so that also, I think we've probably all had this experience. Early on as a trainer, I was much more likely to be dismissive of those clients, right? And be like, I don't want to work with that person, get them away, right? Obviously in a professional way, right? But I was losing out on business and the ability to really help someone because I didn't really have the tools and the understanding to go, I think I could help this person if I made them a better client, if I used my communication skills to help improve their understanding, right? I mean, haven't you had that experience?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And maybe that loud client who wants to speak over you is very loud about promoting you and just helping that little old lady with her mastiff.
Yeah.
Totally all in for that.
Yeah.
I just wanted to reinforce one of the things that you'd said. And you mentioned like role playing. It kind of seems, maybe silly. It's uncomfortable. It's not popular, I think was the word you used.
Yeah.
And if everybody could just think, does Tiger Woods go out into the championship and practice a new swing?
Yeah.
Probably not. So practicing your sales, practicing your communication with your clients is going to be way better served if you work internally with each other and are supportive and helping each other.
Yes. Yeah. The time to try and figure out how to work with difficult clients is not in the moment when you're in with a difficult client, right? And these are things that I wish had been communicated more when I started, right? It was, it was a little bit different of a time. There wasn't as much social media, and so like communication about these kinds of things. So that has really grown, and I think that's a plus. But I still feel like there's a vacuum of talking about some of these really important things. I think it's easy to have the mindset, and I think I made the mistake some of having this mindset of like, if I'm just a really good dog trainer and can yield results with dogs, I don't have to be good with people. And even I would think more common, I don't even have to be good at business. The business will just show up, right? That's flawed thinking. And unfortunately, it can take, decades to figure out that's not the right approach, right? Even if I remember having that like badge of honor of like, look, I have a 6-month wait list of clients. And it took me learning some about business to be like, that's actually not great, right? What that means is that I'm probably underpricing myself. And what I need to do is make sure that I am pricing so that I can take time off and so that I can pay my trainers the best rate because I really value the work that they bring. And so that my clients are extra motivated to show up because they have a strong financial investment, all of those fun things. Yes. So it's one of the things if a new trainer is listening to this and thinking that you can just dismiss these things if you're a really good dog trainer. In my experience, that's not the case. It's very, very important to pay attention to these other hats that we wear as trainers.
Very well said.
Okay, so one thing that I like to do before I kind of get into some of the practical tips that trainers give, or that I can give trainers, is really just overviewing, like what are the benefits of focusing on client coaching? What are the practical benefits that somebody could walk away with? So first of all, you get better results, right? If a client understands and is motivated to do what you ask, it's better for their dog, it's better for the client, and it's better for you, right? Win, win, win. That's always the goal, to have those triple wins, right? Because they can actually utilize the information that you're giving them. And because of that, you will have better satisfaction. There is no faster way to burn out than knowing that you have the information, giving that information to the client, but not having that information absorbed by the client, right? And then, like I said, we're in a weird space as dog trainers because the results of what we do hinge on two difficult things. One of those is a living being. A dog is a living being. And think about all of the things that we can't control. I don't control their genes, their breed, their early life experiences, what socialization they have, what rules are followed at home, what their health is like. I mean, all of these things. It's not fixing an appliance, right? So one of those things we don't control. And then we also don't control the person who's responsible for that dog and the situations that they put them in, right? So from a client's point of view, they want us to be held accountable for the results, but we have these other moving parts that make it very difficult, right? For us to, I don't control everything that happens to and around this dog. So the client coaching aspect then, in my point of view, becomes very, very important because we need ways to communicate that and we need to arm our clients to be successful. And those are the things that prevent that burnout, right? Because we have ways to discuss that and navigate those experiences with clients that are not just, well, I had my lesson and I'm not seeing the immediate results, and like clearly you're not a good trainer or this training is not working for me, kind of thing, right? And then also, you get better business results, right? When clients are more successful, when they feel better about the training, they're going to be talking about you and advocating for your training business. So it's going to feel better for them, and they're much more likely to recommend, neighbors and cousins and all of those kinds of things, which typically are the best kind of leads, those word of mouth leads, because those people are really invested in what you do. So it's really a win all the way around, whether you're looking at it from the dog's point of view, your client's point of view, or your point of view. I have unfortunately run into trainers or training students that have started to tell me that they're backing out of the industry because of the interaction with the people, right? They like the part with the dogs, right? And they can hire somebody like you to help them with the business aspect, but that it's the interaction with the people that is the most difficult for them. And if someone is finding themselves in that space, what I would suggest is really dive into some of the topics that we're talking about today and see if you can find some ways to change that dynamic, because it's been life-changing for me in my business, and I think it could be for others.
Yeah, I wanted to add too, I've signed up for things where it's like, this looks great. I'm going to be amazing at this. This looks easy. And then I get into it and I'm like, dance classes. I'm like, I'm terrible. Why am I sweating so much? This is not fun for me at all.
Yeah.
Painting. I go to those where you paint and wine kind of thing. And I'm I had to paint my dog and I'm apologizing to her the whole time because I'm I'm sorry, mommy is destroying your perfect face.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, you bring up a really good point, because if you're thinking about the psychology of it, why are people coming to you as a dog trainer? For the vast majority of clients, they have a problem that is either frustrating or overwhelming, or there's an emotion tied to what's going on, right? And they want you to make life easier for them. And what do you do as a dog trainer? Guess what? Here's all this homework that you have to do. So instead of making life easier, you're like, hey, there's all this work, right? And the goal is that long term life will be easier, but oftentimes, especially when we're dealing with more complex behavior, we're asking them to take on more, which is very difficult. And then on top of that, right, it's just hard to change habits. We tend to live very busy lives. We have lots of things. We're kind of in an attention economy now in our culture, right, where lots of things are pulling at our attention. We're used to very quick results. I want my Amazon delivery and my, Uber Eats and everything now. And dogs don't often work that way, right? They take time. And there's also something that I call the myth of dog training. This is kind of a little bit off topic, but it does relate. So one of the conversations that I have with clients a lot is If you look at the construct of how we think about dogs and dog training, how it's portrayed in media, on Netflix shows, if you watch any movie where there's a dog, if you walk down the street and I ask anybody to define for me, what does dog training mean? Overarching, what you're going to get is obedience command training. Sit down, stay calm, right? Those kind of things. And that's a part of dog training. But for what I do, working with complex behavior cases, that is not the part that we are focused on. We are focused on behavior modification and getting into the emotional health of what's going on, trying to answer the question, why is the dog behaving this way? What do we need to do to modify this dog's behavior successfully? And so there's a lot more involvement than just, you need to practice sit 5 times a day or whatever. And so it becomes really, really crucial that we have clients who get that and that we have a way to communicate that effectively, because those clients can be rock star clients when they understand this is not just about getting your dog to follow commands. There is more involved here. And those can be some of our very best clients I have found. Okay, so let's go through a few of the things that I teach students and my staff and see if they can benefit some of the people that follow your podcast.
Perfect.
My first and probably my most important tip that I would give trainers: why before how. When I first started working with clients and I look at those outlines compared to my outlines now, there is a really big difference in those outlines. And that difference is how much percentage of the time I spend on telling them what to do versus why we're doing it, right? Probably when I first started, I didn't cover why at all. I just said, great, grab your leash, we're going to do this. We're going to put your dog in a place, and here's the release word, and here's your treats, and da-da-da-da-da-da, right? And now I would say I spend often more time explaining and building value as to why the client should do what I'm telling them to do before I explain how. And again, remember that I'm working with more complex behavior cases, but often the things that I'm telling clients to do, they're not very difficult, right? One of the first things that we might be discussing is basically stop putting your dog in crappy situations, right? You have a dog, aggressive dog, stop taking them to the dog park, or don't walk past the neighbor's dog that barks and lunges at your dog, and causes this big outburst. We need to take a break from that and work back towards it, or whatever. So all the management stuff, right? But what I've learned is that just saying it in one sentence is not enough, right? Just telling someone, don't take your dog to there, right? Don't take your dog to the coffee shop. It doesn't build enough value. This is especially true the farther away what you're telling the client to do is from their end goal, the more powerful that value build needs to be. So if the client wants the coffee shop dog, but the dog has stranger danger, and you're saying, absolutely do not take the dog to the coffee shop right now, we need to work up to that, you better have a compelling case for that client, some strategies in your pocket to get them to buy in. Remember, they're not dog trainers. They don't have all of that perspective that you and I have that no, you can't start at the finish line. You got to work up to that, right? And so you have to have strategies in place that are going to build that value. And there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. I have a list of 25 strategies that my team can pull from, but I'm going to give you our number one most powerful motivational strategy as an example. And I'm hoping that people who are listening will then think about what are some other motivational strategies that I should have available in my pocket when I'm trying to motivate clients to listen to my instructions. So the number one strategy I use in every single case, anytime I'm teaching with every single client, is called connection to end goals. How is what I am saying, telling the client to do, how does that ultimately connect to them meeting the goal that they want to achieve, right? If I'm saying, don't take your dog to the coffee shop, right? Because I want to manage the dog, but they want the dog to get to that point. It's my job to fill in the missing pieces of saying, if you take your dog to the coffee shop now, when he is not ready, he's rehearsing icky feelings. He's going, oh my gosh, this is overwhelming for me. There's too many people here. I need to be on edge. I'm stressed. My mom can't keep me safe, whatever, right? And so rather than moving us towards, hey, this is comfortable and I can cope in this situation, you're actually moving us farther away and potentially putting yourself, the public, at risk, whatever. So instead, what I want to do is take a break from that space so that he can just relax. And we are going to work our way towards that space by going to a quiet kind of coffee shop space first and practicing there and strategize to get back to the busy coffee shop. By just taking the time to explain that, now my client has a better understanding of why I'm recommending this and is much more likely to follow through, right? That's what I've ultimately found is one of the most powerful strategies with clients, explaining why before how and connecting to their end goal.
Excellent information.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense when I say it, right? But it's like just kind of putting it into words and carving out the space in a session to have that conversation. And when we talk about why before how and the motivational strategies, I mean, there's so many things. I could, teach a whole weekend workshop on this or write a whole book about it, right? So I'm just giving a little bit of the tidbits, but I think this is a really powerful one that dog trainers could start with. If you really go through and you look at each thing that you're going to teach a client and you spend the time to figure out what are a few ways that I can motivate this client as to how important it is, right? It's so valuable for that client. It really brings them on board and helps them respect what you're saying rather than just quickly brush off what you're saying. So when I teach this, we dive more into how to integrate these motivational strategies, how many of them to use. Like my average client, I'm using multiple motivational strategies, right? That's how important motivation is and how to customize those for the client that's in front of you. Okay, let's go on to the second tip that I think is really important. This is especially true if you're a newer trainer. This is one of the most common things I see with newer trainers, and that is TMI, too much information, right?
Yes.
Giving too much information. I want to talk about what the goal of a dog training session is. The goal of a dog training session with a client where you're working one-on-one with them is not to give them everything you know about what's going on and how to achieve their goals, right? That is too much information. And I know that especially new trainers are passionate and excited about everything they've learned. And I love that, right? And I want people to hold on to that. But trying to dump all of your information in one session is not valuable to the client. It's overwhelming to them. What I think of as the goal for a private lesson with a client is to give them the right amount of information that I expect them to be able to take action on between that session and our next one. That's really my goal, is to say, okay, these are the things that I want you doing, practicing, managing, whatever, and to give them the right volume of that information. So for me, that's typically 3 skills maximum, right? And I'm kind of reading my client. I consider myself, as I work with dogs, I'm an evidence collector. That's kind of my first thing that I like to do with dogs, is pick apart who is this dog and what's their life like and what's their home environment like and what's their behavior like, and collect all that information. But simultaneously, I'm collecting evidence about the human that I'm working with too, right? Because that will help me as I'm formulating things like what we just talked about. When I'm building value, what's valuable to this client? How can I use what I know about them to build value that's specific for them? But it also helps me as I'm generating my lesson outlines and deciding how much information am I going to include. Well, I might have a client that I can tell is going to struggle a little bit more. And so for them, I might say, you know what, we're going to focus on nailing just this one really important thing and making sure that they understand that and have that down, rather than me giving them 3 things and them not retaining any of it. Right? So I get to customize a little bit for the person that's in front of me. And this is where having an outline, again, really shines. It will force you to not TMI client if you stick with your outline. And there's a couple of other benefits with outlines, right? So it keeps you organized, right? And that includes after a session. You've been doing this a long time. You're going to have that client where you had a session and then they fall off the planet and you don't hear from them for 6 months until usually some kind of big event happens and they bit the neighbor or whatever. And one of the things that I tell new trainers and my students, you want to try and have scalable habits. So when you're first starting, you might be able to keep track of, the 5 clients that you have mentally and what you worked on. Can you do that now, Lianne? No, you can't keep track of what everybody is doing. You have too many clients and dogs, which is great. But that means that you need to have a system in place to kind of know where you left off, right? Or what was covered.
Definitely.
Or like in my case, if I want to hand them off to a team member or refer them to another trainer or whatever, right? I need to have some kind of information in order to be professional, right? And so an outline not only helps me in the moment, but it's just saved, right, in our files so that we can then revisit that and be like, oh yeah, okay, we did work on these skills and here's what we would do next, or we need to revisit these or whatever, right? We can also use an outline. We can forward it to a client after, so long as it's written appropriately for clients to view. That's kind of a reminder to them of what was covered. Hey, here are the 3 skills. Here are the things that we talked about, right? So that they can refresh as needed, right? I've even done that as kind of a gentle helper when a client comes back 2 weeks later and is like, she's still pulling on the leash. And, we go back, we look at their outlines together and we review, but have you been doing this, right? And what about this? And those kinds of things. And then from just a documentation standpoint for like legal stuff, right? It can be helpful just to document, especially for us, because we often work with dangerous dogs. I want it documented that the trainer said, somebody on my team or myself, this dog should not have access to children, or you need to stop taking the dog to the dog park or whatever, because and that has been sent to the client, right? Because,
Yes.
occasionally you're going to get somebody who's like, no, the dog trainer totally told me that my grandchildren could ride on him. I'm like, no, I don't think so, right? And just, the liability stuff is so big in this industry that having that documentation, it's just another added win of using the app.
Yes, and definitely documenting is very advantageous. We as dog trainers have 3 risks we need to consider. We have the dogs, very obvious. Dogs run away, dogs bite people. We have our staff, and there's situations where things can happen very quickly and the staff may get hurt.
Yeah.
A dog may get away from the staff, things like that. And then we have the clients. Same kind of liability there, where the clients can put the dog. They had this really great pit bull mix named Dolly, and it was just so sad that she had to be euthanized because they put her in a situation with kids that they shouldn't have.
Yeah.
And then the kids she bit, their parents, and legal stuff happened, and ended up that poor Dolly had to be euthanized. It was like, this is the most easy, most perfect angel.
Yeah.
So yes, definitely lots of areas of risk.
Absolutely. And, nothing's ever going to be perfect, but the more that we can do to mitigate that risk, right, by documenting is really important. And I want to circle back to the point that I was making, because I know if I'm a newer trainer, I might be thinking like, I don't need to deal with all this yet. But the point that I was trying to make is that don't wait until you have to suddenly start to recognize and scramble when you're busy to start to put these things into place. It's so much easier if you get your business hat stuff done right from the beginning and you get your client coaching and your organizational systems set up, right? Then you don't have to try and figure out while you're treading water because your business is growing and you're so busy, how to like operate those things, right? You get into ourselves habits, right? And I will tell you the habit of just storing all your information up, that is not a scalable habit. That is a recipe for disaster. And so I really encourage people, even if you're at the beginning of your career as a dog trainer, to think about these things and ideally seek help from somebody who is in the position that you want to be in and get some mentorship on how to set those things up. It will save you a lot of stress and potential liability to have things appropriately set up like that. Okay.
Yes. And in your situation, you've sold a portion of your business. I've sold multiple businesses. And so I know that if you're a young trainer, you're just starting out, you're not really thinking about selling your business. But if you build it to scale, then it's probably going to be worth more money. Also, like I sold my business and they have all my notes. Certain, crazy clients are on do not disturb, so they wouldn't accidentally reach out to them. So all of that stuff is super organized for them. And it just gives your business more value.
Yeah, I mean, those systems, like stepping into a functional system. And one of the other things that I find some about the systems, it's really interesting. I'll give you an example. A colleague of mine and a friend reached out about this dog aggression case, and he was going to pick up the dog from a client for a board and train, and the dog was trying to attack him, and he couldn't get the muzzle on, and all this stuff. And he was asking me, what would you do in that situation, right? And I mean, my answer was really, really easy, and that was, I wouldn't be in that situation. I have an onboarding process that actively avoids that kind of situation for safety, for liability, for my relationship with the dog. This was a large Akita, right? And I kind of bring that back around to what you're saying, is that having systems in place oftentimes avoids problems like those difficult clients, for example. Well, those clients are reduced. They show up as better clients for me, partially because of the system that I use to onboard those clients. They already show up as better clients and more malleable for me to help them and shape them into the kind of clients that will do well because of some of these systems that are in place. And it's really easy for a trainer who hasn't invested into systems and client coaching and some of the business stuff to not recognize that you can help a client become a better client, right? There are certainly always going to be clients that are just red flag clients. But there's a lot more yellow flag clients that can be moved, which is great for your business, great for your personal satisfaction, and great for those clients who you get to help. And so those kind of systems are just so valuable.
Yeah, and the word help really stood out to me because, I mean, that's what we do this for. We want to help the dogs.
Yeah. Absolutely.
We want to help the clients. Yeah. So that for me is my why I'm doing this, is I want to help. And I think that's the case for most dog trainers.
Yeah, I agree. And it's like nothing's more frustrating than knowing that you have the information and not having somebody take action on it. You're always going to have some of that, but you would be surprised how much that can be reduced through good client communication. And the secondary benefit of good client communication, you're always going to have some clients that don't do the follow through. Just whatever, the pain point is not strong enough for them. They have other things in their life going on, but they know it's their fault and not your fault. So you don't get the pushback from them about not seeing results or negative reviews or anger or whatever, because they recognize. I often compare it to a fitness coach. You know, you can hire a fitness coach to take you to the gym and show you how to do crunches and do all those kinds of things. They can't do the crunches for you, right? Very similar here, right? Which is, I can work with you and your dog and we can start the habit change and I can show you. I can't do it for you. You live with this dog 20, you're ultimately responsible for what happens to and around them, and, is a part of your relationship with them and all that. And so I always hope that I'm helping clients. But in the rare cases where a client just cannot take action for whatever reason in their life circumstances, they at least know it's because they're not doing the follow through, right? Not because I'm not a good trainer or not doing my best to help them be successful. And believe it or not, that is really helpful. And I've had clients just outright admit that and still recommend us to people because they recognize that they just weren't doing their part. Okay, so let's go to the last kind of pointer that I will bring up so that trainers can start thinking about it. And that is creating accountability. You would think that our job is just to give information, right? But it's really helpful when we talk about creating habit change if we take it an extra step as trainers and try and create some kind of structure for creating accountability with our clients. Because changing habits is hard. You can have a client that is motivated, that wants to do it, but just has so many other things going on. It's just difficult. You're kind of swimming against the tide when you're asking someone to habit change. So a few things about creating accountability. One of those, it goes back to the pointer I just gave, do not TMI. People, can you imagine giving somebody 10 different sets of instructions and then expecting them to integrate that into their day-to-day life and be successful? It's impossible. Almost nobody can do that, right? What you really want to do is look at the information that you're giving and ask, how difficult is this for somebody to do in their life? And that will help you determine how much you're going to ask of that person. So by not TMIing and looking at the information that you're giving, you can make it more successful. You also need to give concrete instructions. So imagine a teacher teaching a lesson in class and then saying, all right, go home and read your book. Which, so open-ended that nobody's going to do it. It's not concrete enough. It makes it very easy for somebody to rationalize not doing it or doing 30 seconds of it or whatever. The more concrete your instructions are, the more likely somebody is going to be able to follow through. So I might say, I want you to do 3 10-minute sessions of this engagement work, or I want you to get in 20 recalls throughout the day, or whatever. I have something concrete that the client can execute on. And then that way I can follow up with them. Did you get those 20 reps in? How did they go? How is your dog responding? Those kinds of things, so that it's very concrete.
Nice.
And then something that we've done, and actually could be really fun if somebody had like a calendar system that they're using from the business hat to schedule their clients, which if you're manually scheduling clients, not scalable, stop doing that, figure out a way to automate it, right? But so one of the things that we've done is I created, for example, a very simple report card document. And so imagine this, your client schedules a private lesson with you, you do your lesson with them, and then the next day, 2 days later, whenever you want, without you as the trainer having to lift a finger, a little form gets texted or emailed to them, checking in about how homework is going. And our report card does things like asking them to self-score themselves, A through F, how they're doing with their follow-through on their homework, asking them what concerns have come up, right? So that I get that information and prepared for our next lesson to discuss. Also, it's an added bonus because one of the things, concerns are going to come up with clients, right? It's very important that a client feels heard and gets to express that, right? So having them express it on a form rather than just standing there in front of you allows you to prepare for it, allows the client to kind of vent and feel heard. If something, it doesn't even mean that it's negative towards you, but maybe they just had a really tough experience, right, with their dog and need to talk about it. So you can be prepared. It invites the client optionally if they want to share a picture or video of their dog doing their homework so that we can utilize that on our social media. Like, look at this dog who's working their way through this program, and we just got this homework check-in and looks like Rocket is doing great or whatever, right? And it asks the client just some basic questions about what they're doing. The key here is that I want to create some accountability, but I don't want to add more to my workload. Hello, we're all, if you're a small business owner or headed in that direction, time is so precious, right? So doing something that doesn't take extra time, like automating a report card, is really, really helpful. And it's another way of documenting. So like now that I have staff, for example, if I have a client who starts to say like, look, we're not getting results, and I pull 3 of their report cards and they've given themselves a D and said that they haven't been practicing their homework, guess what conversation I get to open up and have with them, right? And there's a whole way to navigate that conversation, but it's helpful for me. And you would be surprised how honest people are on their report cards. It's really interesting. So that's one of the ways that we talk about creating accountability in a really simple way, is just having a way. It doesn't have to be a report card, but it can be having a check-in with a client. Maybe you do jump on a 5-minute Zoom and say, I just wanted to hear how homework is going so I can plan our next lesson and make sure that questions are answered. Maybe it's asking the client to submit a video log, as to what's going on so that you can see, and just knowing that someone's going to show up, right? You take that person who's helping you at the gym, a fitness coach or whatever, right? Just knowing that that person is going to be there and expects you there every Tuesday and Thursday at whatever time. That, if you look at the psychology of habit change, that's huge into helping that person get into that habit change. And that's ironically part of our role here, is just being kind of that steadfast, hey, I'm here. Hey, I will be checking with you on Thursday to see if you've done this. That can dramatically increase the odds of people.
I bet they just love it. Like I tell our clients, you're going to be getting a little survey, and they're so excited to fill that out and give feedback. I really like that it's asking them to have a lot of self-perspective.
Yes. And that can be really, really helpful. It's also helpful, as you point out, as a business owner, right? Once somebody gets to that point where you have people that are working for you, right? It gives me the ability, now I'm not there in the session, but I can see as those come in and review them, right? Does this person have concerns? We ask them another question. I thought, this is really important to me. It's something that took me a long time to learn. Celebrating wins, very important in what we do. And so one of the questions that is asked is like, have you had a win? Even if it's a small one, tell me about it. And so from an owner point of view, I get that. Are you having challenges? Are you having a win? And then I get to like just have eyes on that so that I can connect with that trainer. If I'm seeing one, if I see a win, I have learned I need to celebrate that with my team. Even if it's a little win, that's really important, right? Because we deal with some difficult cases. So it's very important to celebrate our wins. 2, if I'm starting to see, hey, there's some concern from this client or there's some challenges that are unique, then I can connect with that trainer and we can put a plan into place to make sure that that stays in the direction that we want it to go. So I like trying to implement things that have multiple wins, right? And this, as you alluded to, like the client, without taking more of my time or my trainer's time, the client feels more connected and more heard and more responded to, right? Just because they have that somebody reaching out, right? So we can get ahead of problems or just strengthen our relationship with that client, because it is a relationship, right? And then we get the documentation, and I get to view it as the owner, and it also helps some of our trainers prepare for their next session. What do we need to do based on the feedback from this person? Do we need to revisit more of the lesson that we did? Are we ready for the next step? Can we focus on a different goal? Whatever, right? It's all kind of laid out there, which is really nice.
Thank you, Shin. I think your
Yeah.
suggestion of getting on a quick Zoom with them in
Yeah.
between, especially
Yeah.
after like maybe the first lesson, it's going to help build the relationship and make it stronger.
Yeah.
For me, it's very, if I have my dog and if I'm a pet dog client and I'm in a situation, I'm more worried about my dog. I'm kind of stressed out. We can't learn when we're stressed out. So if I get on a Zoom with you as the trainer, it's going to be less, my dog isn't even in the picture, so I can learn more and ask some questions and maybe retain that information better. So I think that getting some Zooms into your packages along that journey would really make things a lot easier. And then, like if you're walking into that next lesson, what's going on, kind of get ahead of it, like you said.
Yeah, we kind of have it set up as like office hours. Like our trainers have like basically a calendar link that the client would get where they can schedule one of those we call Zoom check-ins, right? And it's optional. The client wants to, right? Unless the trainer sees something in the report card where they're like, let's please do that. But one of the benefits of that, besides what you said, one of the things that prompted me to do that was that you're creating a structure that's more professional, right? I mean, clients have, probably your contact information, they're texting, whatever. It can get overwhelming when a client is just constantly messaging or texting. And those can be some of your best clients because they're very invested, but they can also wear you down if it's too much. And it starts to blend into what I think can be an inappropriate relationship where, I'm not an emergency line, right? It's important that I hear the concerns of a client and I want to give them information, but I need to balance that, right? Like I don't just call my attorney randomly throughout the day or text them like, I have this question, what about this? And da 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 da. So by creating a structure where you're like, this is the space, and you have to reserve that space going through my calendar in which we can have those kinds of conversations where your needs as a client are met, where you get to be validated and heard and do those kind of things. But it's not just random bits of texting, which is more appropriate for a relationship between friends or family members. It kind of balances both of those needs because I'm not a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week service, right? And I don't get paid that way. So I think it's important to balance those needs. And a lot of what I teach in client coaching is about how you structure things. I'll give you another example that has ended up being very powerful for our team. Language architecture. Language architecture is very big into helping create and foster a relationship that's productive and professional between a trainer and a client. And what I mean by that, where I came up with this, I was babysitting my niece and nephew who are very fussy eaters, right? And my sister had been trying to get them to eat some vegetables. No, we're not going to eat the vegetables, da 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 da. So when I had them, I said, you can either have 2 bites of peas or 2 bites of carrots. Which of those is the least offensive to you? Well, suddenly, the option to not eat a vegetable was not presented. Suddenly, the option became, oh gosh, between these 2 horrible, horrible options, which one should I pick? And it's amazing how structuring language in a certain way can help facilitate an outcome that the client ultimately wants and that you want for that client. But in structuring your language, you can get them there better, faster, easier, more effectively, all of those kinds of things. And so a concrete example that has come up with my team, they are no longer allowed to use passive language. You might want to do this. Think about trying this. Maybe you could do this. No, none of that, right? This is one of the times where when they were in apprentice mode and starting to work with clients, they would present, hey, I had this happen with the client. And I'm thinking, how did you get into this situation? I've been doing this for so long and I'm not in that situation. And it took some self-reflection of me going, well, gosh, I'm slightly bossy. And they're like super, super nice people. And so they're like, hinting at or using this passive language, whereas I'm like, great, grab your treat pouch, here's what we're doing. And when I presented it that way, the client's like, I guess this is what we're doing, I'll follow along. But when you language architecture to space for, do you want to like listen to what I'm saying? Or maybe try this? You created space for, no, I'm not going to do that. And so it created challenges in their relationship that where I had to intervene. And we have since learned how to avoid those situations. But little things like how you structure your communication can absolutely yield very different types of results.
Now, could you give me a response that you might come out with if I showed up to your lesson and I have my, French bulldog, and how did the week go? And I said, I haven't practiced.
Yep.
I'm sorry,
Yep.
I have not practiced.
Sure. All right. So the first thing, if ever a client brings up anything negative, they haven't practiced, they had bad results, there was an incident, whatever, right? The first thing that's important is that client feels heard, and if there was an incident in particular, validated, right? Maybe I'm going to remind them that they completely mismanaged and that's why the incident happened, but that's not the first thing that I do. We have to remember that when we're working with clients, this is a relationship between us. I'm going to tell a really quick little story that will illuminate the point that I'm going to make. When I was in high school and college, I did competitive speech and debate. And there was a particular round of debate that I lost, which I didn't think that I should have lost. I was reviewing the coaching cards with my coach, and I kept saying, but I didn't say that. I didn't say that right on the cards. And he paused and he said something that has impacted me in many ways, including as a dog trainer. And he said, you know what, Erin? It does not matter what you said. It matters what that person heard. Those can be different things. And this is very true when it comes to how we work with dogs. People are filtering information based on largely their emotional state, their stress levels, their hormones, what's going on in their world. So you have to be a little bit adept at kind of reading that situation and also just creating general protocols that will apply to most of the public, right? Because even if you say something valuable, if it's interpreted as, for example, something a dog owner might hear, oh, she's judging me for being a bad dog owner. Suddenly now I have somebody that is combative or shut down, or she's not listening to me. She doesn't like me, right? Or she doesn't like my dog, right? If you are not thinking in that brain of like what I say is getting filtered through their emotional state and their life experience and all those kinds of things, you could have totally unintended consequences for what you're saying. So the first thing I do is I always validate what I heard. So I might say, hey client, thank you for being honest, right? First and foremost, this is a relationship between us, and your ability to communicate about what's going on in your world and what you've been able to do or not get to do is really helpful, because then it allows me to structure the session appropriately so that I'm not expecting your dog to know all of these things because they haven't done the homework. So I do appreciate you being really open and honest with me, right? And if it was a different situation, if the client was talking about an incident that they had, or, I tried to do the homework and he was just, wouldn't do it and I'm so frustrated or whatever, you might be tempted as a trainer to jump right to, well, let me remind you of the skills and the steps or whatever. But what you really should do first is say, I hear that you're frustrated. I understand that. You're not my only client that gets frustrated. Dog training can be challenging. And then you can shift too. But most people need to just be heard briefly. And we have to be careful. We're not therapists, right? So we do need to stay in our lane. We're not marriage counselors. We don't handle people's trauma, but we still do have to think about how we respond to clients in the moment when they present an emotion. Like I once told my team of trainers, you can't pretend that a client is not crying, right? We're not there to solve it for them, but we at least need to acknowledge, hey, I see you're having a big feeling. Do you need a minute, right? What can I do to support you, or whatever, right? Okay, so that's the first thing I would do is deal with that person in a personal way, and then shift to, so let's talk about what that means for our lesson now. Because you didn't practice, what I want to do is kind of go back to where we were at our last session, and let's see how Fido is doing. And if he's ready, we'll take our next step. If not, we're going to do a repeat. And then I would include a value build at the end for how important homework is. And then we would talk about an action plan. Not something that I went into here, but creating more accountability for how are we going to get that homework done? What stopped you from getting the homework done? And what can we do to change that this week so that at our fourth session, we're ready to go to the next? Something like that.
Yeah. One thing that stood out to me was that you thanked them for being open and honest. And I wanted to ask one more question because we are at the top of the hour, but I'm sure you've had this as well where the client lies and they say they've practiced. I totally get that, but the dog tells the truth.
Yep. Yeah, so if you can usually, as a trainer, start to spot these clients, right? If I feel like they are not being honest about it, I'm not going to confront them in the moment. That won't go well, right? But I am going to do something to increase the accountability, like asking for videos, right? Or jumping on Zooms, like 3 times that week if I need to, right? So that I can, all right, let's see how the homework is going, right? I need to do something that will create that. I will also continue to remind that client about what yields results. That this is usually how I phrase it for clients. Trust me, client, nobody in the world wishes more than me that I could control the outcome, that all of the work would just be about my knowledge, my expertise, and my dedication to meeting your training goals. If it just hinged on that, your dog would be a rock star trained. Unfortunately, right? I see you and your dog 1 hour out of the week or whatever, right? There's all this other learning that takes place. Whether you're practicing homework or not, your dog is still learning. And so by, again, revisiting the topic and making sure that the client understands that if they want those results, that connection to end goals that I talk about, there's no magical wand waving that I can do, or like, oh, you're the client that doesn't want to do the work? Well, why don't you tell me? I'll just fast forward you through this other track, right? Like, that's not how it works. I wish it did, but it just doesn't work that way. So I can shift that onus back onto them. So when I have that client, and this is going to be a very common thing with trainers, where they're like, I didn't do the work, or you can tell that they didn't do the work, but I still want the results, right? Again, as a trainer, the first thing that I do is I acknowledge, I hear you're not getting the results that you're looking for, and that sounds frustrating. And then I pivot to, well, let's talk about what it takes to actually get the results. And what I know as a trainer, I'm doing this for decades, right? About what steps you have to take if you really do want those results. And that's how you can balance those things. And like I already mentioned, some of our onboarding process and some of these way that we structure language and how we use our motivational strategies really prevents this kind of person or minimizes the impact of this type of client. It's pretty rare that we'll get this type of client who is that pushy about it anymore, just because we have all these other systems in place that really help them become better.
So I wanted to find out, first off, I think you need to write a book about this, but I'm sure that's got to be on your list because you've had an amazing journey so far. But what book can you recommend now off the top of your head, if you can think of one, to help dog trainers to learn more about helping the people side of the leash?
Yeah. So I do have it in the back of my mind to like write a book or do a class or whatever. And, one of the challenges here is what I talked about at the beginning, which is the 3 hats. I have a lot of passion and a pretty good amount of tested knowledge about client coaching. What I don't have is the 3rd hat to like market and structure and set all that stuff up. And it's a good example of why people need to reach out to business mentors and somebody like you in their business, because it doesn't matter if you have the other 2 hats if one of them is missing, right? People don't just magically buy my book, right? So that is something that I am thinking about, because I would love to. I can't tell you how many times I get in front of trainers and trainer students, and I'm like, gosh, I have all this information, and I know it would be hugely beneficial for them, and I don't have a structure or a mechanism to like offload that information for them. So it is something that I do want to think about and try and come up with a system for. But in terms of books, so I'm a total behavior nerd, right? And so there are not a specific book about client coaching, although I do know that there are those books, but I have not read them personally yet. I probably should, to see. It's always fun when you connect with somebody else who's been thinking about this and to see where you guys overlap and to get more, a different point of view about it. So I should do that. One of the books that I read that I thought was both interesting and insightful when I was learning about this stuff is The Psychology of Persuasion. really, really fascinating book. It's
Mm.
not built for dog trainers, of course, but it's a book that starts to go into some of the details of how people make decisions and what things persuade them. It touches a lot on sales stuff, so helpful for the business third hat. You probably have people that might be thinking this way, because I thought this way, which is like sales is icky and bad because they didn't understand what it really meant, right? That it was actually about finding the people who would really benefit and explaining to them the value that I could bring, not trying to sell them stuff that they don't need or just, just be greedy about money. And so the book kind of touches on some of that. So I think that that could be a good starting point. And anything that would be about habit change. It's surprising how difficult habit change can be. So it's really easy to just dismiss clients as not willing to do the work. But when you take a deeper dive into some of the human psychology, you learn that actually there are things that make it more difficult to change habits. And being aware of those things and pre-planning them and knowing how to navigate them can make you so much more successful. Like for my team members, part of our role play is knowing where a client is going to push back when we mention things and navigating that. And a lot of the clients wouldn't verbalize that pushback. But I've been doing this long enough, and now I can test my trainers. Okay, we just went through this outline. Where is this client going to be thinking, yeah, but, and knowing that, how do you preemptively deal with that yeah, but, whether or not they express it, right? And knowing where people are, what are the most challenging things that you're asking people to practice at home? And how do you create a profile of this specific type of client and what their unique challenges are going to be in executing on homework or whatever. And so knowing all those things kind of in advance means that we can help navigate those experiences more successfully. And some of these books and stuff on habit change can really help lay a foundation. It's not practical information as a dog trainer, but it's kind of foundational information.
Have you read Atomic Habits?
I haven't, but I've heard that's a really good one. It's on my reading list.
Yeah, James Clear, I think. And I don't read, I just listen to the audiobooks, but I found that one was very helpful for me to improve my habits. And yeah, could definitely be something. I think I've read it twice, and I think that it would be good to read it again from this different perspective, from maybe like how to coach clients. Because when I first read it, I'm like, oh, great, I'm going to do all these things. It's going to make my life better. I'm going to be better at my habits. But maybe coming at it again for anybody that's already read it, and just read it again, but from that perspective.
And I think you're right. It's like, take yourself out of the dog training world and look at yourself trying to do a different habit. Like you as just a novice person going to the gym or, remembering to do whatever, your bookkeeping or whatever. And think about the real challenges that you have for something that you have to do, right? And how difficult that habit can be getting into, right? It's the same for our clients. So while, yes, there is some blame and there's appropriate venting that we need to do as trainers for the difficulty of working with clients, my hope is that people understand there's still actionable steps that we can take to improve that experience for them and for us, and to ultimately do what you and I clearly both share. This is a business and it's how I generate my income and pay for my stuff. It is much more than that. I am very passionate. I want to be able to use my skills to be able to help people and dogs live better together. Right? And so if I can nail the client coaching, if I can nail the dog training, and if I can nail the business hat so that I get people coming in, those three things. So
Erin, we are just a little bit over an hour, so we'll wrap it up. Yeah. Could you share where people can find you?
Yeah. So I was playing with, about a year ago, a social media page called Dog Trainer Help Desk. If at some point I put together a class or content on this, that's where it would be. But you can also follow we're mostly active in social media on Facebook. So if you just look up Tug Dogs, that would be another place where you would see postings about trainers courses and things like that. Like I said, unfortunately, I don't have anything formal to offer, but I hope to get there. I would love to be able to get in front of some training students and, some early trainers or even not early trainers that just haven't focused on this topic yet and want to. Hopefully in some capacity, I'll get to do that. And I have a book kind of in the back of my mind. It's just now carving out the time to make sure that I get that done.
Awesome. And then your website?
Yes, it's teachtraintug.com. And so we went with Tug Dogs because of playing tug and that representation of partnership and cooperation and play and fun and just the relationship aspect of give and take when working with dogs. So that's, if anybody's curious, that's where the name came from.
I like that. Yeah, it's a cute name and it's memorable.
Thank you.
I think lots of good homework today, and we've talked about being better to coach our clients, but
Yeah,
also we've got a lot to learn as dog trainers because that's,
absolutely.
like you said,
Yeah,
those three hats. We've got business, we've got training the dog, but we've got coaching the client. And I think that that is like a big one that a lot of people need to take a deeper dive in.
absolutely. Yeah. And I love that you're putting out this content for the people that follow you. I think it's just so valuable. We don't know what we don't know, right? And watching us all share the same type of frustrations, I think it's helpful to have these dialogues and for trainers to know they're not alone with that, but that there are things that can be done to improve that and improve the quality and your satisfaction with working with people. Because if you got into this business because you don't like working with people, I have some sad news for you. You know, the vast majority of us dog trainers need to be able to effectively work.
Absolutely. Yes.
Very good. Well,
Great.
thank
Well,
you for
thank
hosting
you.
me, and I hope your followers get some good insight and get their wheels turning on what they can do in client coaching and can apply some of these tips.
Yes, and how critical this is. So
Yeah,
thank you so much, Erin.
you're very
Appreciate
welcome.
your time today, and hopefully you'll be on again to
I
share.
would love
Hopefully, folks have learned. I've learned, so I'm really thankful that
it.
you shared with us
Yeah,
today.
if your audience thinks this was valuable and wants me to do a deeper dive, we'd love to chat again.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. So that's Erin Kramer from Tug Dogs, and I'm Lianne Shinton from Automation Dogs, and thank you for listening.